Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I start a new series using my sketchbook that I made in a previous video. We are going to be using some Caran in this, so let's take a look at the colors that I have on the screen for my palette. I have white, turquoise blue, light blue, Prussian blue, pink, periwinkle blue, russet, which I will not actually use, umber, dark green, dark olive, light olive, lime green, ochre, golden yellow, which I absolutely love, regular yellow, and then the light gray. I have my size 8 round from the Royal and Langnickle Zen series, a microfiber cloth, and only one glass of water. So let's get started on this piece. While I am a person who loves to make sketchbooks, I'm not necessarily a person who enjoys using them daily. So this is going to be the start of a new series for me, and I will have a playlist on this where I'm going to weekly try to do one sketch in here a week, and I'm going to dedicate this sketchbook to working on more abstract impressionism type art. I am more naturally inclined to doing realistic pieces, in particular portraits. That is my passion, but I love the Impressionist art, so I want to practice on that some more. So I really also love the Caran Neocolor II. So I'm going to dedicate this book to using the Neocolor IIs. I don't think I'll use any other type of medium in this. I think I want to see different ways I can use them in here and just create this type of art. So I'm getting started, no pencil drawing. I'm using more of what we call gesture drawing for my students. I would tell the kids we call it scribble drawing. Let's just call it scribble drawing. And when you're working with the Neocolor IIs, you don't really have to fill in every little space, especially when you're just kind of sketching out the piece and wanting to block in some colors, because once you add the water, it's going to do that for you. And since we're making this an Impressionist piece, I'm not worried about perfection. I'm not worried about detail. I'm simply looking at my reference photo and I am blocking in just the shapes and the colors that I see. As you may know, if you watched my videos before, my favorite site to get reference photos is Unsplash. Unsplash also has an app, so you might check your app store for that. They don't sponsor me or anything, but I do love them because the photographers allow you to use their photos for reference or for anything that you're working on, as long as you give them credit for the photos. So in the description below, you'll find a link to Unsplash, and you'll also find the photographer that took this picture. What I looked for in working with this were photos that were slightly out of focus or had a portion that were out of focus. So this was not the entire photo. This was just about maybe a quarter of the photo. I zoomed in on the part that I wanted. This little book, if you have seen the video where I made this is about a 5x6 roughly. It was not an exact measurement on things, so it's almost a square little book. And I just took a square out of the piece and made sure that it was not in focus, because if you're going to practice doing Impressionism, you really want to focus on the colors, you really want to focus on the shape, and you do not want to focus on the detail. So if you're wanting to practice something like this, then I recommend you look for photos that are slightly out of focus. I did another one of a meadow that had flowers in it, and I'll link that one down below as well. That photo was also out of focus. However, it did have a few of the flowers that were a little closer that were in focus. So I'll be doing some of those in this book as well. But again, the only thing I'm doing is just kind of haphazardly, it seems, but there really is a purpose to this madness, just kind of blocking in the colors. And then I'm going to come back with my water and activate all of these colors. But before we do, these are just some scrap papers. Actually, they are from the making of this book when I accidentally ripped them and I was trying to sew them together and I had to take them out of the book. Instead of throwing them away, I'm putting them behind so I don't color on pages beneath. Now, if you're looking at that cloud, because that's supposed to be a cloud, it has a slight green tint. That is because if any of my former students are watching, Miss Tanya did not clean her brush properly. I would always get onto them for not cleaning their brushes properly and then dragging just dirty paint onto a new painting. But here we go. Don't do as I do, do as I say, I suppose, but always clean your brushes. So it'll be fine. We put a little water up there. I'll come back over in a minute. Now, I did use Prussian blue on these hills in the background, and it's going to look shocking up front, but this isn't our only layer. As you notice, I'm going in a circular motion. I'm going to make certain that all of the colors I've put in there are activated. I don't want any of the lines to remain where I colored. Now, some artists like to leave those in, and there's a point in here we will talk about that I actually could have left the piece as it was, and that's going to come a little bit later. But the type of art that I'm doing, wanted it to be more watercolor and not really have any of those drawing lines left in it. So I'm going to go ahead and just activate this by moving in a circular motion. I found that works best when I have something I'm just wanting to do like a flat wash on like this. And the hills are a bit strong. I am going to knock those back a bit with some water because there are some areas where the color has concentrated and I want to move that around a bit, but this is just the bottom layer. It's not the final step, and much like watercolor, while these are bright now, especially that yellow at the bottom, once it dries, it's going to get a lot lighter. And I will let this dry between coats of coloring, so when you see it switch to a new area where I'm painting again, or a new frame where I'm adding more layers, just know that it has dried in between. And I let it dry naturally. I did not use my hair dryer. Some artists say that it actually makes a difference if you let it dry by itself as opposed to speeding it up with a hair dryer. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments if you have an opinion on that. But this just kind of dried naturally, and then I came back and I colored on it again. So I'm going to be quiet, let you watch me paint for a bit, and then I'll hop back on and tell you a little bit more about what I'm doing. Now that I have everything basically activated, I'm coming back and softening edges, and I'm making certain that I don't have any more of the color that has been unactivated. I don't want that to reactivate. I want to be able to layer on top of it. And this is the part I mentioned earlier. I'm going to come in because it's concentrated up on the top and it's creating a line that I don't want. So I'm going to soften that. And when I add my color back on top in a few minutes, it's going to take care of all that and make it a little bit softer at the top. But I don't want any lines in this. I want everything just to be colors that softly juxtaposition with each other. I don't want them to be a hard edge. So this is where we're fixing that green cloud from earlier. And if you live in the South, you know you don't want to see green clouds. For those of you that do not live in the South or do not live in an area of the world where you get tornadoes, then you don't know what I mean. But if you are from the South, then you know exactly what I mean. So, and I'm actually doing this on a day when I'm trying to go ahead and get everything done on this video, because this evening we may well have to take cover because we have tornadoes coming through. So say a prayer for us, please. So I am adding, I don't want just Prussian blue. You know, I said that was kind of shocking. I want it to be kind of a purple, kind of a gray. So I'm adding the purple and I'm adding the gray, and I'm even going to add a little bit of pink in there because there was some pink kind of at the base of those hills or mountains in the background. So once it activates, really those colors blend well together. So that's what we're doing there. I'm going to go ahead and add the green on top and just go back and forth adding these colors. And as I'm working on this part, I'm noticing that I like the way the colors are laying down, and I'm really considering, after adding this layer, not adding the water, just stopping here. And again, I may well do that on some future pieces, but we'll see. Now, I have added dark green in these. I think they're like, some of them are trees, some are bushes in the background, and that dark green is more of a blue green. It's very vibrant, and I always use either umber or olive green on top to kind of knock that back. I see that blue green in the background. I need that, but if you're not careful, that dark green can really overtake a piece. Now this gray, it's a wonderful little light gray. I love that light gray. It really came in and saved the day, and you'll see that toward the end. It really added something to the piece and kind of mellowed things out, because there are some strong colors in here. The yellow and the flowers in the foreground, and the darkness in the trees in the background, and it really came in and kind of worked all of those together. So again, I'm going to be quiet, let you watch me add some more colors on top, and I'll hop back on in a second. This point, I was almost certain that I would just leave it as is, because I like all the pencil marks, but then I remember this is not my goal for this piece. My goal was to make a watercolor piece that was more impressionism, and to me this wasn't exactly what I had in my mind, but it may well be for the future, because I did like all of these scribble lines on here, so, or gesture drawing lines. So we're going to go ahead and add the water, and you'll notice, as I did in the first set, I did not mention it, but I will mention in this one, I'm doing the sky, I'm going to do those mountains, and then I'm going to hop down to the bottom and start working from the bottom up. And the reason for that is that I want those to dry a little bit before I start working on those trees. I don't want the purple and the green to mix together because what I'm going to get is brown. And so I decided I would just let those dry a bit before I went back and added the water on the trees in the upper part. And again, I do have the problem with it wanting to create a line, so I'm just softening that line at the top of those mountains or hills in the background. Now the paper is drying fairly quickly. This is cold pressed paper, but it's also not 100% cotton. So this is more of a cellulose based paper. Well, it is a cellulose based paper, and it dries a bit differently and colors react a bit differently than they do on 100% cotton paper. So this was my first time using the Neocolor IIs on this. Wasn't certain how they were going to do, but this paper was some that I had left over from teaching. And it's what I would use with students. If you're learning, it's a good paper. It's Grumbacher, I believe, and it's 140-pound cold pressed paper, but it's not 100% cotton. Personally, I prefer the 100% cotton. I like the way the colors kind of blend together and the drying time on things. And if you're using a hot press, then you have even more time to move stuff around. But this kind of dried fairly quickly. Even though it did, something I noticed is that in some areas, even though things had dried, I could come back with a little water and lift up some color. So I thought that was interesting. I can't necessarily do that with my hot press paper or my cold press that's 100% cotton. So that was kind of an interesting experiment. So I'm doing the same thing here. You notice I'm working with when I had the yellow, I was working just with the yellow, adding the water to that color so that I didn't bleed it into everything else. Now I'm working with the greens. Because this is an Impressionist piece, you'll see me do a lot of dabbing of color like I'm doing here. A lot of touching the color and spreading it around in that way. And as I go farther along, that will be the technique that I use. As we're getting these bottom layers in, it's okay to use a circular motion or back and forth motion just to kind of get everything activated. But I'm going to be using more of the dabbing technique as we get farther along in this piece. Once again, I am doing a final run through, making certain that my edges are not too harsh and making certain that all of the pigment has been activated, and then we're ready to do some more coloring, but I'm changing techniques. And if you've watched any of my Caran before, you know that I will pull out this little palette. So you know what that little palette is, but for those of you that are just finding me, have never watched me do this, this is from our local Walmart store, their grocery pickup, and it is, I'm using air quotes, a free gift. This is it's a little cutting board, little plastic cutting board that absolutely serves no purpose. I'm going to complain because I can use the back of it. It has a good texture that I can color on it and then activate those and use them like a watercolor out of a pan or, out of a palette. So now I can put in concentrated color exactly where I want it. Sometimes when you put those colors down and you activate them with your brush, you're going to be dragging other colors into them and changing what's on the paper or the canvas. And I have done this on canvas. If you haven't caught that video, I'll put that down below as well. But you can change the colors a little bit. And I want specific colors. That's a hard word for me to say. Specific colors in certain areas, and by coloring on this and then coming back over, I am able to achieve those colors in those areas. So that's what you're going to see me doing here. And again, this gives more of that impressionist, what I would always tell my students, dots and dashes that the Impressionist artist used. And I have my colors kind of separated here. The two yellows at the top of the palette, those are more for the flowers. And then for the grasses and the trees, I have those down below to kind of keep them separate. I am going to bring in some umber. It's going to look black, but because this is an Impressionist piece, I'm not using black. Impressionists kind of stayed away from black, but I do like umber, and I have talked to some of you on some of my other videos, and I really do think I'm going to add some Payne's Gray. I love Payne's Gray working by Winsor & Newton, and I do want to add that in. I just haven't had a chance to get that yet, but I am going to do that because I think that would be a good dark color to add in. So again, if you have any colors that are your favorite in these Neocolor IIs, let me know down below. I'll see if I have them in my set, or I might want to add them. I have the 40 color set, and there are a bunch of colors in there I'm not even going to use. So I recommend, if you're going to get Neocolors, take a look at the sets, but probably you're going to want to get colors that you know that you'll use, because they're awfully expensive for buying a set that you're not going to use all the colors. But I really do love these, and as I said, this is what I'm planning on using in this book. And what I have found with the Neocolor IIs, I don't know if this is the same with the other Caran sets, but with the Neocolor IIs, I've actually dropped my entire box of 40 on the floor before, and we have wood floors, and I've done it a couple times actually, and none of them broke. So they are hardy crayons, so I highly recommend them. Now this is the part where I told you the blue or the gray, the light gray came in handy, and I have mixed it with the blue, the same blue I used in the sky, and you can see it adds a nice contrast in the piece. There was on the left hand side right below those trees something that looked kind of like a rock, and I do apologize if you hear that loud noise in the background. I think that's a motorcycle going down the road. Kids are out of school for spring break, and so we've been hearing that a lot. But that really, the blue and the gray together, I thought I'm going to carry that all the way through. So that was something I kind of altered in the piece. Now what I'm doing is adding some of the final touches with the crayons. I want a few more bright flowers down below to kind of contrast with those purple mountains in the background. And I will activate these, but I'm not going to activate them a great deal, only a little bit. So that's it for this piece. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate it when you're here, and I hope you'll join me for the other pieces in the sketchbook. Until then, I will see you in the next one.